Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to tonight's council meeting for Monday, the 23rd of July 2018. Could we all please stand for the opening prayer? Thanks. Lord, we ask that you guide us in our decision-making, protect us in the community we serve from all that is evil, and strengthen our unity for the welfare of the city. Amen. I would like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people as the traditional custodians of the land that we meet upon today, and pay my respects to the elders both past, present and future, for they hold the memories, culture, tradition and hopes of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that contribute to our community. Thank you. CM2, recording and webcasting of the meeting. This council meeting is being webcast and recorded. By speaking at the council meeting, you agree to being recorded and webcast. Please ensure that if and when you are speaking at this council meeting that you are respectful to other people and use appropriate language. AlburyCity accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of this council meeting. An audio recording will be made for administrative purposes. Conflict of interest declaration received by the Chair and disclosures of political donations. I have two conflict of interest declarations. I have one from Councillor Amanda Conn. It's a non-pecuniary, which is less than significant. Brief description is the proponent of this development application is my employer. Meeting type is council meeting. CM 13.8 development application 10.2017.3580. 8.1 alteration and additions to the Mercy Hospital. Action is to remain in the chamber and vote. The second one is from Mr James Jenkins, non-pecuniary, significant. Reason, I'm the public officer of Albury Conservation Company who made a submission to the draft cat management policy. Council meeting CM 13.6 draft cat management policy, and the action is leave the chamber. Thank you. Ms Squire.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Advice to the council meeting. The Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979, Section 147, requires a person submitting planning applications or submissions regarding a planning application to disclose any reportable political donation and or gifts to any local councillor or employee of council. Reportable political donations include those of or above $1,000. The disclosure statement forms are available on Council's website or from the Customer Service Centre and must be lodged in accordance with the Act. The forms are also available at the back of the chamber during meetings. In dealing with development applications, councillors need to take into account specific matters contained in the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979. Accordingly, the provisions of Section 79C(1) of that Act are set out in the Council Officer's report detailing issues to be considered. The Local Government Act 1993, Section 375A, requires that a division be called whenever a motion for a planning decision is put at a meeting of the council. Planning decisions means a decision made in the exercise of a function of council under the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979, including a decision relating to a development application, an environmental planning instrument, a development control plan, or a development contribution plan under that Act, but not including the making of an order under Division 2A of Part 6 of that Act.
Thank you, Ms Squire. Apologies, I have one. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor, to move the recommendation that Council receive and note and accept the apology of Councillor Doxey and grant leave of absence for the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron.
I'd like to second the motion from Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. CM5, a Merrill minute. There is a short minute here that is a motion of council that council, in accordance with the delegations of authority, endorse the Director of Economic Development and Tourism, Ms Tracy Squire, as Acting General Manager for the period 23 July 2018 to the 31st of August 2018 inclusive. I therefore move that motion. Councillor Cameron, did you wish to speak or ask a question of that motion?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. This is the first time I've ever noticed a Merrill minute to be used in this fashion. Is there a reason that we've needed to do this?
It was an urgent item that was decided would be put on the agenda for tonight's meeting so that we could formalise that arrangement, Councillor Cameron.
But why is it necessary, Mr Mayor? We've never done that before.
Because it's required that we do it.
It is required, is it?
Yes, it is.
Why is it required? Is it in the Act or the regulations?
It's required as a formality of council, and it is a Merrill minute, so I think the questioning needs to stop right now, Councillor Cameron.
No, excuse me, Mr Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Cameron.
Why are we required to do this when we've never done it before?
Because we're keeping you abridged and abridged of what's going on in council, and certainly making you aware of what's going on. So
I was aware.
You were.
Got an email.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury, did you wish to value add?
Yes, I do. I didn't receive an email, or if I did, I didn't read it. But surely this should have gone into urgent business rather than a mayoral minute.
It's a motion that we appoint the acting general manager for that period. It's not urgent business. It's a motion.
So
it's a mayoral minute.
We're using the mayoral minute to put forward a motion.
That's correct, because it's an urgent motion of council.
Which didn't go into urgent business.
Because urgent business is not considered to be a place for motions, Councillor Stutchbury. It's urgent business without notice.
Well, if I seem to be not paying attention for the next few moments, I'm just going to check my emails. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Action plans, please, councillors. Mover and seconder, thank you.
We're going to vote on your minute?
Oh, I put the motion.
It's a minute.
It's a minute. I need to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Predictable. Thank you. Action plans, please, councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the following action plans be received and noted. 6.1, actions complete for noting only. 6.3, know where 6.2 went, but anyway, actions in progress. And 6.4, long-term issues more than 3 months.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Looking for a seconder, thanks. Councillor Vandervan.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, you wish to speak to that?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Happy to put the motion. There's no questions. All those in favour? Anyone against? Motion is carried. Confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting held on the 9th of July 2018. Thank you. Councillor Cameron.
I move the minutes be accepted.
Did you wish to read the recommendation?
That the minutes of the council meeting held on the Monday, the 9th of July 2018, at 6 p.m, be confirmed.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Second that motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron, did you wish to speak to those?
No, thank you.
Thank you. There being no question or debate, happy to put those. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. There are no reports from community forums. There's no notice of motions or notice of rescission. No presentations and deputations. And no reports of minutes from committees and working parties. Documents for sealing. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Vandervan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Happy to move the recommendation that Council authorises a seal to be affixed to the documents outlined below in the presence of 2 signatories authorised to affix the seal pursuant to Regulation 400 of the Local Government General Regulation 2005 and the Council seal and management of legal documents and advice procedure. A, deed of assignment of lease Anjet Proprietary Limited to Jacob Properties Proprietary Limited of Lot 35 DP 1131972, 1 Avalon Street, Albury Airport, file 11035575.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken.
Happy to second.
Thank you. Councillor Vandervan, do you wish to speak to that?
Definitely not, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you. CM13, Officers' Reports for consideration. CM13.1, the Draft Albury Airport Master Plan 2018. Councillor Vandervan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Move the recommendation the Council A receive and note the final draft Albury Airport Master Plan 2018. B, place the final draft Albury Airport Master Plan 2018 on public exhibition and invite feedback. And C, in the event that no submissions are received, the final draft Albury Airport Master Plan 2018 be adopted.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken. Thank you. Councillor Vandervan, do you wish to speak to that?
This is a document that has been prepared over the last probably 18 months or so. and it basically blueprints the where we see our airport for the next 10 years and perhaps beyond that. The airport is the jewel in the crown of Albury City as far as business and tourism is concerned, and we are well serviced in that regard by quite a number of major airlines. And as far as our region is concerned, I think it provides value to the whole of our region with the air services that are in and out of that particular airport. It does form a particularly strong part of Albury's business, Albury City's business, although it does need to generate significant income because the costs associated with anything to do with aviation is reasonably expensive. From the perspective of where we see the airport and related businesses going, this is the document that spells out what we see as the future of Albury Airport. And also it outlines quite a few opportunities that exist that our staff will now be able to pursue along the lines of increasing and improving the performance of the airport, both financially and socially. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderman. There being no further question or debate, I'm happy to put that motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you. 13.2, the draft Albury City Information Guide 2018-2019. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you to move the recommendation as a motion that Council adopt the draft Albury City Information Guide 2018-19 as presented, Mr Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
I'll second the motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, you wish to speak to that?
No, thank you. It's primarily an update. However, it needs to be submitted as a new document. It's an administrative process. Thank you.
Thank you. Being no questions or debate, happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you. The draft South Albury Active Zone Public Exhibition results, 13.3. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm just trying to find the relevant page, but I'll read from the screen. To move the recommendation as a motion that Council receive and note the comments from the public exhibition period for the draft South Albury Active Space Master Plan. B, endorse the minor amendments to the draft South Albury Active Space Master Plan, and C, endorse the full version of the South Albury Active Space Master Plan.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, do you wish to speak to that?
Very briefly, Mr Mayor, it's a good opportunity for Albury City to be able to further some active space, again, in an area where there was significant feedback from the community about, largely very well received, and following those submissions, one more significant change has been made with regards to the skate component. I think it's a good proposal, good community engagement, and I think the community will support this space in droves. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Just making or bringing to your attention the late submission of the attachment from the submission made by Greg Millwood from the Waits Park upgrade, and just checking everyone received that and is aware of it. Yep, thank you. I have a question from Councillor Con. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through to the relevant member of staff, please. I did receive overwhelmingly positive feedback from the community about this plan, but I did receive a couple of what I thought were valid questions about lighting and shade to make sure that this area can be best utilised in summer and in winter, and wondering if those changes can be included after we approve the plan tonight.
Okay. Mr Jenkins.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mr Mayor. If Council endorses a plan tonight, we'll immediately start on the detailed design for the plan with the hope that we can get all 4 stages done at once. Certainly the need for shade, particularly over the recreation equipment area, was highlighted and can be incorporated into the design. Probably not currently in the budget, but we can work through that process at a later stage when we're ready to construct. In terms of lighting, we can progress the lighting design through the detailed design phase. And the incorporation of lighting is not a difficult item because there's already lighting at that edge of Waits Park. And we are also proposing to do a detailed lighting design with the beach volleyball people to ensure their courts can also have lighting installed.
Councillor Cameron, you wish to speak for?
Yes, I'd like to ask a question at the outset, if I may be permitted, Mr Mayor.
Yep.
The late objection that we've received this evening, titled Waits Park Upgrade, talks at length about volleyball. Am I correct in understanding that that is beach volleyball?
Mr Jenkins.
Through you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for the question. Mr Millard is involved with both beach volleyball and volleyball in the city. However, his comments, my understanding is his comments relate to beach volleyball at that particular site.
Can I say thank you, Mr Mayor? Thank you to the staff. Look, I just briefly want to express my strong support for this master plan. It sees the fulfilment of a campaign promise of mine to support the establishment of outdoor basketball courts, something that we've taken a little while to get to, but we're getting there, and hopefully we'll see other outdoor basketball courts around the city. I have nothing against beach volleyball. I think it's a good sport. I don't play it, of course, but in terms of watching it, it's probably my second favourite Olympic sport after boxing. But having said that, when you make campaign promises, you should do everything you can to fulfil them, and I will be strongly supporting this motion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. There being no further question or debate, Councillor Glacken, did you wish to close debate?
No, that's fine, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. 13.4, the draft skate and BMX strategy public exhibition results. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council A receive and note the comments received from the public exhibition period for the draft skate park and BMX strategy. B, endorse the minor amendments to the draft skate park and BMX strategy, including the new title of Albury Skate and BMX strategy. C, endorse the final version of the Albury Skate and BMX strategy. D, immediately undertake consultation to develop concept designs for the Albury Regional Skate Facility. And E, develop a funding strategy for the Albury Regional Skate Facility, which actively seeks grant funding opportunities.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
I'll second the motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Con, do you wish to open debate?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Only briefly to say that I received overwhelmingly positive feedback from the community on this strategy, and I suppose the only criticisms would have been why didn't this happen sooner and when can construction start? So looking forward to seeing the detailed work so we can get moving with this strategy.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, you wish to speak for?
Just to add a little bit to that, recently I was asked to do a media interview about that strategy and about the skate park, and it's interesting the number of kids that come from out of town to use the facilities here, and with an enhanced facility there's no doubt there'll be more and more of them coming.
Thank you. There being no further question or debate, Councillor Con, do you wish to close debate?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Now the 13.5 draft activities on public lands and roads framework. Thank you. Councillor Cameron.
I thought Councillor King might have been first, Mr Mayor.
You push his speaking against button.
Oh, I see.
You want to speak? You want to open? You want to move the motion, Councillor King? Thank you, Councillor Cameron.
The council note the submission received on the draft activities on public lands and roads framework. B, endorse the draft framework and associated policies and procedure. And C, place the amended fees and charges on public notification for a minimum of 28 days, and if no submissions are received, adopt the fees and charges as part of the 2018-19 council fees and charges.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury?
Second that, Mr Mayor.
Councillor King, did you wish to open debate?
just like to ask a couple of questions, if I can.
Did you wish to open debate prior to that, or did
No.
You? Okay.
Okay.
Questions? Yep. Your questions?
Yeah, to the relevant member of staff through Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
Can the relevant member of staff give me the exact date that this was raised at council for the investigation to be adopted?
Mr. Keys.
You've got 2017 written in the report, but have we got a firmer date than that?
Mr. Keys.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe if I go back through the existing tonight's agenda, we'll have reference to it in the action items. Just bear with me while I go back to that. February 2017, there was a request made in regards to develop a draft RV parking policy and associated community engagement plan. It follows on from that. It's part of the investigations that were caught up in this.
Councillor King.
The follow-up. So in the report it says, I have you say, was requested in August 2017. Can you give me an idea why it's taken 6 months from that point to get to have a say?
Mr. Keys.
Through Mr. Mayor, as Councillor King would be aware, there was updates provided to Council in that time, advising on the progress of it and indicating that we were going to incorporate the investigations into an RV park and parking for those facilities into the review of the outdoor activities policy. Hence, it was carried over until that policy was ready for progress and release on a Have a Say program.
Yes.
So on the 23rd of April, it came before the council meeting, which is 9 months later from that point. Can you give me a rundown why it took a further 9 months to get to that point?
Mr. Keys.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, again referring to the information provided in council documents this evening in the table. There was a council workshop in October last year, providing an update to all councillors on the progress of it, the items and issues that had to be developed, the research that was then required to go through that. We also, given the topical nature of it, decided not to put it out over the Christmas period. It was carried over until further opportunities were available, and hence the further report in April.
Councillor King.
One more. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
So it was put out for public consultation for a month from April until May, and we received one submission. Is that correct?
Mr. Keys.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we received 2 submissions. And during the initial period, we received advice and feedback that some potentially affected parties were not aware of it, and therefore a further additional request was made to extend the exhibition period, and we provided a further month for that exhibition period to ensure that we had adequate consultation and that those potentially affected businesses were fully aware of this proposal. That's why there was an additional delay.
A further follow-up. Look, this type of outdoor policy is probably relevant to every city in Victoria, New South Wales, potentially Australia. It's taken 18 months to get to this point. Did council staff actually receive existing policies of other cities of a similar size with a similar type of demographic, and that has been in operation, so we could potentially look at the pitfalls and the benefits of the policy?
Mr. Keys.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there was research undertaken that looked at other existing policies and frameworks that are applicable, not only in New South Wales, which has some very particular or peculiarities around how the legislation is applied and how these policies can be developed and then actually enforced. And there are different options that were available. There was a large amount of work that was done initially, then based on feedback from other councils and also legal advice. There was further revision, which contributed to some of the work that was required. We also looked at Australia-wide, but in particular, we had to focus on New South Wales because of the vagaries of our system, and then utilise those other experiences from other larger regional councils as well as metropolitan councils on what was the best approach and putting together this integrated framework.
A further follow-up.
Yes.
Did you find anything different about Albury in your research that is solely an idiosyncrasy of Albury rather than other cities that necessitated this to take 18 months?
Mr Keys.
Through you, Mr Mayor, there were no idiosyncrasies or peculiarities of Albury that required or contributed to any delay. The time taken to progress this has been one, particularly in relation to the specifics of the policy, trying to integrate all of the different avenues that relate to this, actually taking lessons from other councils in how they had integrated their framework, provided us with some clear direction, which contributed to the delays or the time taken, not so much the delays, but the time taken to bring this together and to put forward a comprehensive framework that covered all of these activities rather than focusing on a single activity as this originally started. And the request was specifically started as a request in relation to RV parking. This framework actually extends and goes beyond that and picks up a rather extensive amount of activities for, we believe, the benefit of the broader community. And to bring it under one integrated and comprehensive framework was a lesson that we picked up from other councils and saw the benefits in that and trying to bring it back and providing that to our community.
So would you say that 18 months is a reasonable time for this type of policy to be drafted and put before council in its current form?
Through you, Mr Mayor, there's no particular time frame that's appropriate to any policy. It depends on the policy and the issues that are involved. In regards to this one, there's some very comprehensive issues, very detailed issues that are involved, and we need to make sure we get it right. One of the things that we have tried to focus on is making sure that the system can work, can be implemented, and that our community can understand and appreciate what's involved. If it was a case of just running something off the shelf and putting it on the table, we could have done that quite easily. We then discovered in the initial draft that there are a number of peculiarities that may have caused confusion or further complication for our community, and we wanted to make sure that we got it right and we got the best product that could be put out there and would be able to be enforced or put in place and be utilised by our community going forward.
No more questions.
Thank you, Councillor King. I have a speaker forward. One more question. Councillor Vanderin.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just draw your attention to the fact that the proposed annual application fees are all $200, regardless of the size of the monthly fee or the annual fee. And I'm a little bit bemused by that. I'd prefer to see that application fee reduced and the balance of the application fee amortised over the periods of time where the licence is being issued for. It just seems silly for me, from my perspective as a business person, that the licence fee or the application fee is $200 for a monthly application, and it's also $200 for an annual application fees. So,
do you wish to ask a question?
I'm happy to ask the question, but I'm also quite keen to move an amendment that this application fee be reduced to $50, and that the $150 be amortised over the costs of the additional costs of the licence fee, whether it be monthly, annually, or I think there's even 3 months and 6 months licences. So that's what I seek your guidance or the guidance of perhaps staff, whether that's something that can be contemplated.
Mr Keys.
Mr Mayor, the application fee is designed to recover some of the costs of the processing and the time and effort involved in trying to process these applications. The monthly fee is to ensure that there's some flexibility, particularly for those groups that only operate in winter months or summer months, whatever the season may be. It's very unusual, if I could say, that we have people who only operate for 1 month It's more people operate on a 6-monthly basis, and they go through a process in checking, applying, and making their application every 6 months, or on an annual basis for a 6-month period.
Just to follow up, Mr. Mayor, but I still draw your attention to the fact that whilst it might be unusual for the monthly applications to occur, their application fee is still the same, $200, as it is for an annual fee. So are our fees and charges be able to reflect that differential in the period of time we're issuing the licence for?
Mr. Keys.
Mr. Mayor, I appreciate where Councillor Vanderven's coming from, and that actual fee is tried to be reflected in the monthly fee versus an annual fee. The actual cost of processing and working through and providing the approvals and going through the checks and balances is the same, whether it's for a 6-monthly period or whether it's for an annual period. And that's what the application fee is designed to recover the cost of.
So, Councillor Vanderven, is it a desire of yours to move an amendment on this particular motion, or are you comfortable with that response?
No, I really would like to see, and I understand where Mr. Keys is coming from, that there's always this issue around, the fact that you've got to recover your costs for doing the fees, but I think that I'd move a motion and gather the thoughts of the other councillors with regard to this, and a move a motion that the monthly fees be increased to cover the difference between the $200 annual application fee being reduced to $50 for the monthly fee components of that chart, which will be the first one. It's got a monthly fee of $43. Then there's another one. The secondly is a monthly fee of $86. And then there's a 3-month licence and there's a monthly fee there. And there's a 6-month licence and there's a monthly fee. And then there's an annual licence of as well. So leave the annual ones where they are with $200 application fee, but the monthly ones I would like to see reduced to $50. So if required, I'm happy to move a motion to that effect, amendment to that effect, Mr. Mayor.
I'll just check. I think it's probably safe for you to move that as an amendment at this point.
Yeah, move
it changes the motion quite significantly at this point. So have I got a seconder for that? I'll wait till it gets up on the board. Thanks. Will we consider that? Mr. Keys?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just by way of a comment or advice, there may be some concern in setting that up. If the application fee is to apply for someone using it for 1 month as well as someone for using it for 11 months, the monthly fee would apply unless it was a year, whole period. So somebody who's going to use it for 11 months would pay only pay an application fee of $50, as someone who paid.
Incorrect, Mr. Mayor. I've already indicated that I wish to have those fees reduced to $50, the application fee, but the actual licence fee be increased to cover that shortfall between the $200 and the $50.
Okay. So that's your amendment?
Yep.
We'll just wait for it to come up and ask for a seconder.
Sorry? Yeah, for those ones that have a monthly fee component. Yep. So for the annual fee, still have an application fee of $200 and leave it the same, but the monthly fee, increase the monthly fee to say $53 or something, but the application fee is only $50. Yeah. All right.
You're losing. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, $13 or something.
Yeah, they're all 200. All right. License is
It'd be to 46 and then the other one to 99. Yeah. 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 There you go.
Councillor Vanderman, you comfortable with that?
Yeah, that's. I think I've just had a been off camera or off microphone conversation with Mr. Keys, and I think he's understanding of the what I'm trying to achieve here.
Mr. Keys?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what we indicated might work is that the monthly fee, so an application fee for any monthly proposal be $50 flat rate. The $200 be retained for an annual application fee, but the monthly rate for usage would go up by $13 per month. So in the first instance, for the first grouping, it's $56 in the table, and the second table would go to $99. And so depending on the number of months they have it, that reflects the reduction in the original fee.
You have a question?
So just to clarify, Mr. Keys, under the proposed change, if someone only applied for a licence for 1 month, they'd pay 50 plus 13 and we'd be losing the rest of the 200.
No, you'd still pay the 200 by the sound of it.
Sorry, no, I think Councillor Con's correct. They'd pay the 50 plus 13 on top of their monthly fee of 43. Yeah.
Council will be losing revenue of the difference between 200 and that.
About $137. Yeah.
You comfortable with that?
Yep.
Yep, okay. How are we going with that amendment? Councillor Vandervan, Mr. Keys, you comfortable with that motion? Yeah. The amendment? Yeah. Okay. Councillor Stutchbury, do you wish to second that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I wish to second that
you.
amendment to the motion.
We're live. Councillor Vandervan, do you wish to open debate? Thanks.
Yes, basically speaking for the amendment and the motion. Obviously, we've had some conversations about the overall policy, the activities policy, but this is specifically around the charges associated with it, and I think that the amendment seeks to be a little bit fairer in the application costs as against the usage costs. Now, I understand the concern that Councillor Con might have that we are foregoing some revenue, but I think that this is a fairer way to be charging people for this stuff. Mr. Keys has already indicated that they don't have a lot of monthly fee applications, but I still believe that we should be trying to not discourage the monthly fees by having a lower application fee. So I don't have any issues with the rest of the policy, but I believe that this is a fairer method of charging for those potential monthly users. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vandervan. Speaker against a question. Councillor King, question.
I've got a question for the relevant member of staff through you, Mr. Mayor, in regards to the late night outdoor dining conditions.
Can we hold that off till we deal with the amendment, Councillor King?
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Con, you wish to speak against?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I appreciate what Councillor Vandervan's trying to do, but I wish that this had been brought up at any stage during the 18 months in which this policy was being developed, or indeed in the last week prior to the meeting. At the moment, the amendment will leave us not covering the costs of actually approving the licences, and I don't know what impact that's actually going to have. I would rather approve the original recommendation tonight, and if fees and charges continue to be a problem, then we can have a look at them when we do fees and charges as part of next year's budget with a bit more due diligence than is what being done tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Con. Speaker for Councillor Gluckin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm actually speaking against the amendment and for the original recommendation.
So you wish to
just
speak
confirm
against
that.
the amendment? Yes.
So just having clarified that.
Yep.
I believe that we should tonight be moving the substantial and the substantive recommendation not the amendment, because we really are putting this out for public notification, and which is the actual recommendation, that we put it out for public notification. And I would prefer us to be looking at the suggestion raised by Councillor Van der Ven as part of the feedback, or in conjunction with any feedback that we would get from the community. And if there is an issue with regards to the fees and charges, then it will be raised by the community, and we will review that accordingly. If there are no concerns raised by the public and there are no submissions made, then we would simply move through. So therefore, I cannot support the amendment, but do support the recommendation. I'd also like to note, in speaking for this motion, that it is a very detailed set of documents and investigations that have had to be undertaken. This is a very complex issue because it covers many aspects of public land, public facilities, including roads, sporting facilities, footpaths, dining. It looks at an enormous gamut and cross-section within public space within our community. And therefore, I have no issue with the fact that it has taken the time that it has to get to this stage, because of all the aspects that needed to have been reviewed quite significantly. And if we look even at the implications of insurance, those alone are really quite detailed areas and aspects that needed to be determined whilst undertaking these reviews, because insurance alone is a significant component of each of these areas. And I know that I have raised questions previously about not-for-profit organisations using our parks, as well as commercial organisations using our public spaces for their, for example, training programs, and how the impact of insurance may affect us as a city council as well as those organisations using that space. And so I think the staff have done a fantastic job in bringing all of the aspects of these areas. And if we look at the attachments with our documentation, there's the footpaths and road policy, there's the public land and roads framework, there's the recreational areas, there's the public land, etc. So there's a whole lot of aspects of this policy that have been able to be drawn together and looked at holistically by our staff in being able to bring this presentation to us. I look forward to further consultation or the public giving feedback to us in this area, because of the breadth and the depth of this policy as a holistic policy that we're looking at tonight. So yes, I support the original recommendation, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blacken. Councillor Thurley will speak against.
I speak against the amended motion. Basically, we're talking about what is called a fixed charge and a variable charge. The fixed charge for determining an application is $200, and it should be basically the same no matter what. And the term of use is reflected in the variable charge. So the longer you use it, the more you pay. But it requires our staff to assess every application, and it's been determined that $200 is an appropriate fee for such a thing. In my opinion, that's the way to go. In most other council fees and charges, we often have a fixed component and a variable component, and I believe that we should stick to that, and therefore I oppose the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. There's being no questions or further speakers against or for, I'm happy to send it back to Councillor Van der Ven to close the debate on the amendment. Thanks.
Yeah, look, I understand where the objections have been with this, but from the point of view of fairness for the people that are going to use this for a month, if you're going to be paying $43, but it costs $200 applied, just doesn't make sense. And from that perspective, that's why I moved the amendment. I'm just happy to see where it flies when it's taken to the vote. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vandervan. And on that note, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? Those against? The amendment is carried and it becomes a motion. So, Councillor Vandervan, you've spoken to the amendment and the motion. So
I have, yeah.
So I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you.
No, I have a question.
Well, it's a different amendment. Went through as the amendment, right? CM 13.6, the draft cat management policy, 503. Mr. Jenkins is leaving the council chamber.
Cat lovers leaving.
Thank you, Mr. Ferris. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that Council A endorses the draft cat management policy and procedure and place them in the public policy register, and B, consider the need or demand for wildlife protection areas in the context of the regional biodiversity strategy.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Looking for a seconder, thanks. Councillor Vandervan.
Happy to second that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, you wish to open debate on that item?
Yes, we received a lot of feedback and submission from the community, and I would be the first one, if I were not a councillor, I would have made submissions myself. Basically, we are required almost by state government legislation to manage cats with one hand tied behind our back. We have very few powers, and we have very few ways of managing cats that are not properly contained and looked after. I simply live in a suburban house with a native garden, and despite having spoken to neighbours a number of times, despite having had council rangers attend their premises, I have a cat constantly marauding through my garden. But under the policy settings by New South Wales State Government, this cat would not be considered a nuisance, and therefore I have almost no rights to stop it unless the owners choose to do so. It's just not, we don't have a lot of power, and this policy gives us the best we can get out of the legislation from the New South Wales Government. I think council staff have done a great job on putting this policy together, and it's the best step I think we can make. So I endorse this policy.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. I have a speaker for Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I speak tonight in favour of the motion, which is to put the draft policy out for public submission. And in doing so, I say that while I'm relatively comfortable with the draft policy, I think we need to make very sure that we're hearing from all the people in the community who have an interest in this matter, not just those who are passionate, and rightly so, about conservation, but also those who are cat owners and cat lovers. And indeed, I consider myself to be a cat lover, and I have 2 cats who I don't allow to roam freely or maraud through anyone else's yard. But having said that, with any policy we develop and any period of public consultation that we go into, we have to make sure that we're getting the full range and the full gamut of public opinion, not just the opinion of some people who are reasonably and correctly perhaps passionate about conservation issues. So let's put it out to consultation and let's see what comes back, and then we'll consider the adoption of it. Thank you.
Councillor Conn, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a Dorothy Dixer for the staff, please. Did we or did we not receive a submission from the Albury Cat Rescue Group in regards to this policy?
I believe it's been out on it has been out on exhibition,
Through
Mr.
Mr
Keys.
Mayor, it has been on public exhibition, and we did receive submissions from a variety of interested parties.
Thank you, Councillor Con. You comfortable with that? Thank you. Councillor Vanderman, you have a question?
I have got a question. It's a serious question without expecting a serious answer. Is somebody like Councillor Thurley able to declare their backyard a wildlife protection area?
Through Mr Mayor, no, unfortunately.
Heart River Province.
Unfortunately or
Unfortunately,
I would agree with that, unfortunately.
Councillor Thurley, you wish to close debate?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. On that note, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. If you get Mr. Jenkins back in, please. Thank you, councillors. CM 13.7 development application 10201835931931.1. Thank you. Councillors. Councillor Con.
Thank you. I move that Council A receive and note the contents of this report, and B refuse DA 10.2018.35931.1 for the following reasons. 1, the proposed development is not consistent with the character of the surrounding development and therefore not consistent with Section 79C1B of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979. 2, the development as proposed is not consistent with the controls of the Albury Development Control Plan 2010, Section 9.2 with regard to the provision of reticulated sewer. This results in the development not satisfying Section 79C1A3 and having an unacceptable impact on the amenity of the locality, which is inconsistent with Section 79C1B of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979. The development as proposed is not consistent with the objectives of the Albury Development Control Plan 2010, Section 9.2.3 with regard to wastewater management and Section 10.3 with regard to residential subdivision. This results in the development not satisfying Section 79C1A3 and having an unacceptable impact on the amenity of the locality, which is inconsistent with Section 79C1B of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979.
Thank you, Councillor Con. Second, Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Con, do you wish to open debate on this item?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll be brief because I think you're all sick of listening to me after all that. Look, to me, this DA seems pretty straightforward. We have a minimum lot size for effluent to be treated on site, which we've applied in other areas of the city, including the Splitters Creek and Tabletop Rural Land Strategy. I know there was a prolonged discussion about the character of the development, which I think is subjective, but to me the sewerage was pretty black and white. This development doesn't meet our controls to self-manage your sewerage, and then it needs to be rejected.
Thank you. I have a question before I speak for Councillor Stutchbury. Question.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And I would direct this question to the relevant member of staff through you. And thank you, Councillor Con, for mentioning the sewage treatment as your prime reason for moving the motion. I note that that in our DCP, the minimum lot size for self-treated sewage, which I assume to mean a septic system, is 2 hectares. The neighbouring property is 1 hectare. The property next to the neighbouring property is 1.01 hectare. The property next to that is 1 hectare, and the property next to that is 1.04 hectares. And then over the road, there are 2 1 hectare properties, all in the same street, presumably all running septic systems. So we were looking like rejecting this DA because its area is less than 2 hectares. So could the relevant member of staff please explain to me and the other councillors and perhaps any members of the public who might be present here and interested in his answer, how that can be justified.
Thank you. Mr Keys.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the report is detailed in consideration of the issues related to this development application, and they outline our assessment of the issues concerned. They cover off on the issues around on-site treatment of effluent, including that the application has been supported by a qualified report that states that the site can be designed and installations can be provided that will enable on-site effluent treatment to be satisfactorily carried out. We certainly acknowledge that. The controls that were adopted, the minimum lot sizes endorsed by the Rural Land Strategy for Tabletop in particular, recognise that the proliferation of these sorts of systems across the whole area rather than just on individual sites for septic or on-site sewage treatment could potentially have longer-term implications. But that's not the only criteria that was used in considering or setting forth the 2 hectare minimum lot size. It certainly has a difference in terms of the 5,000 square metre minimum where sewage is provided. That's also trying to recognise the costs that are involved in putting sewage systems in, and particularly reticulated sewage over these sorts of areas. They become almost impossible to provide, as you would see with the development pattern that we've got in these areas, where you've got lots of 1 hectare and above. It's not feasible, it's not financially sustainable to put in a reticulated sewage system, hence the smaller lot sizes if that was to be encouraged. In this location, in particular, the historic development of the area and the historic controls that enable this subdivision in the first place were all aligned around specific entitlements and outcomes that were sought to be achieved, and that included a rural lifestyle or rural residential setting in these areas. That's what's been established in this estate. So the character of that area has already been established. We've got existing residents in that location, specifically in this estate, out of the 12 lots. There are a number of residents that have objected to it against the character that this would potentially create, and feel it's a significant departure. From 2 hectares down to nearly 7,000 square metres is not 25%, it's not a 20% variation, it is a very significant variation to the minimum lot size that we have. And hence the recommendations and the discussion and the debate that's provided in the report for Council's consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, you speak for the motion.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor, and I note the information Council has received again today, that this is not, this whole procedure is not simply about a certain lot size. This land came up when it was Hume's, and it was taken over by Albury, and the conditions on the development are related to average sizes as well as minimum sizes. And so you can have some smaller, but then you must have some larger to retain this average site. And if we continue to subdivide, we do not meet the criteria in our development control plan for an average lot size, which preserves what is called rural lifestyle. And that, to me, is one of the biggest departures of this application. It does not meet that requirement and fit in with the whole community. Those conditions have been known on that land for quite some time. And so this is why I support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. I have a speaker against, Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Thurley, for bringing up the issue of lot size and how it might impact on the amenity of the area. The proposed subdivision is 7,000, the smaller one is 7,796 square metres. The neighbouring block is 10,000 square metres. It's not, if you look at it with the naked eye rather than on a plan or using a calculator to determine the percentage difference from the DCP, it's not a large difference. I've driven down the street, as I said I would, and had a look at the blocks and had a look at the proposed subdivision. And I'd have to say it really does look like a vacant block of land. It doesn't look like part of a household or a garden. To me, it would not detract from the amenity of the area to proceed with this subdivision. And the sewage argument to me would appear to be self-defeating. I think that this DA should be approved. Thank you.
Councillor Stutchbury. There being no further speakers for or against, Councillor Con, did you wish to close debate?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to note my sympathy for the proponents who seem to have reasonable intentions in doing what they're doing, but this goes against our own policies and procedures, and if we want to change the rules, we need to change the LEP. Other people have developed in accordance to those rules, which we should be enforcing.
Thank you, Councillor Con. On that note, I'll put the motion and be mindful we have a division. All those in favour? Councillor Cameron, Councillor Mack, Councillor Con, Councillor Glacken, Councillor Thurley and Councillor Vandervan. Those against, Councillor Stutchbury and Councillor King. The motion is carried. Thank you. CM 13.8 Development Application 102017.3580.1. Councillor Vandervan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll move the recommendation that Council A, receive and note the contents of this report, and B, the development application 10.2018.35808.1 for additions and alterations to Mercy Hospital to establish Albury-Wodonga Brain and Mind Centre at Lot 1 DP 11649664, number 550 Pearl Street, Albury, be approved subject to conditions contained in the draft determination included attachment 3 to this report.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Second that motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Vandervan, would you wish to speak to that?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. There being no debate or questions, I'm happy to put the motion as a division. All those in favour? Councillor Stutchbury, Councillor Cameron, Councillor Mack, Councillor Con, Councillor King, Councillor Glacken, Councillor Thurley and Councillor Vandervan. The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. CM 14, Officers' Reports for Noting. Investment balances June 2018. Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council receive and note the investment balance report for the month of June 2018.
Yes, looking for a seconder. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, did you wish to open debate?
Oh, no, Mr Mayor.
Question, Councillor King.
Yes, through you, Mr Mayor, to the relevant member of staff. Just noting the balances there, there's a distinct absence of the ANZ Bank in our suite of investments. I do recall they may have been there previously. Can the relevant member of staff give us an indication why they're not?
Mr Finlayson.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the term deposit rates that the ANZ have offered in recent times haven't been as competitive as what AlburyCity has been able to obtain from other institutions.
Come for that, Councillor King.
Well, given the revelations from the Royal Commission about the ANZ, I hope it stays that way.
Thank you, Councillor King. Okay. There's no further debate or questions. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to close debate?
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Monthly development statistics, June 2018, 14.2. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Cameron.
I move that Council receive, note and accept the information in the monthly development statistics for June 2018 report.
Thank you. Seconder, thanks. Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron, did you wish to speak to that?
Yes, I do. Very interesting statistics, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. On that note, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Albury Waste Management Centre Air Quality Impact Assessment Report 14.3. Councillor Con.
I move that Council receive, note and accept the report on the air quality impact assessment for the Albury Waste Management Centre.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Thurley.
I second that motion.
Thank you. Councillor Con, do you wish to open debate?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Only briefly to comment that the report was quite comprehensive. Council dealt with a number of complaints back in 2016, which is a very wet year to do with odour at the landfill, and it looks like a significant amount of work has been done since then to ameliorate that, and I hope that the community is aware of that work and appreciates the result.
Thank you, Councillor Con. Councillor Cameron, you have a question?
Yes, Mr Mayor, through you to the most applicable member of staff. I'd like to ask, is there any information contained in the report, or can the report tell us if there's any impact from the build-up of vehicles and the subsequent increase in discharge in carbon monoxide from the continuous use of the boom gate, which forces vehicles to go through the recycling sheds, whether they've got recycling to drop off or not, and therefore creates a further traffic danger, and the delays on busy days due to the recent statistical exercise of gathering statistical information, which further caused a backlog of traffic. And when, Mr Mayor, when will the facility be returned to the use for which it was purpose designed for, to allow vehicles to efficiently enter without going through the recycling sheds and putting people at further risk from traffic control and exposure to being run over, and go through the left-hand lane, which was purposefully designed and very intelligently designed to allow people to do that? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr Ferris.
Through you, Mr Mayor. No, there is nothing in the report regarding odour that indicates the backup of vehicles, as per Councillor Cameron's first question. The second question is that operationally, we have that roadway access way closed to ensure that all traffic goes through the recycle centre. Therefore, we maximise the recycled product and reduce waste going to landfill, maximise the asset, the community asset we have.
Thank you, Mr Ferris. You comfortable, Councillor Cameron?
Comfortable, Mr Mayor, did you say?
Yes, you look comfortable.
No, I'm not comfortable. But,
Comfortable, not culpable.
We'll address this at a future date.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, you wish to speak for?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I do speak in favour. This is a comprehensive report addressing an issue that has been serious. I wonder if other councillors are interested in my comment, but anyway. I also note that carbon monoxide is a colourless and odourless gas and would not have contributed to any air quality impacts at the site. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Councillor Con, did you wish to close debate?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you. Delegates' reports for noting. There are none. Any notice of urgent business? I'm not aware of any. Councillors? No? Okay. Confidential matters, CM17, Serian 17.1. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that we move into confidential to discuss items CM 17.1 and 17.2, as these are confidential items exclusive of press or public on the grounds that the matters relate to 17.1, advice concerning litigation or advice that would otherwise be privileged from production in legal proceedings on the ground of legal professional privilege, Local Government Act 1993, number 30, section 10A2G, and 17.2, commercial information of a confidential nature that would, if disclosed, 1, prejudice the commercial position of the person who supplied it, or 2, confer commercial advantage on a competitor of the council, Local Government Act 1993, number 30, section 10A2D1112.
Thank you. Councillor Glycan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, you wish to speak to that at all?
No.
I'll just ask anyone in the public that wishes to make any submissions in relation to why we shouldn't go into confidential. There are none. Okay. Councillor, put that motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Vandervan?
Happy to move back into open council, Mr.
Thank
Mayor.
you. Councillor Thurley?
I'll second that.
Thank you. With that motion, all those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. We'll move back into open council.
You can advise the empty chamber of what happened.
Yeah. I need an update on that
Hang on, we've got to get the
motion. Here it is.
webcast.
Apparently there are 3 people watching.
This is just, if you're reading out the motions.
Fine.
That one.
No, we need that one. I was looking it up then. Thank you, councillors. Just to reconfirm the motions that were carried under confidential. The first motion was that council receive and note the report, 2, not terminate the design contract, and 3, rely upon clause 32 of AS-1122-2010 to mediate a resolution between the parties. The motion was moved by councillor Con and seconded by councillor Thurley, and the motion was carried. The second motion, expression of interest process. A, submitted an expression of interest as outlined option 1 of the report for the purchase of land described as Lot 304 DP 1166158 Elizabeth Mitchell Drive, Thaguna. And B, in the event of the expression of interest, if the expression of interest is successful, 1, pursuant to Regulation 400 Local Government Regulation 2005 and the use of the council seal policy, authorise the Mayor and General Manager to sign and affix the council seal to land transfer documents and any other documents deemed necessary to complete the purchase and settlement of Lot 304 DP 1166158, and 2, upon transfer to council of the land described as part Lot 27 DP 1014850 be classified as operational land in accordance with the provisions of Chapter 6, Part 2 of the Local Government Act 1993. And that particular motion was moved by councillor Thurley, seconded by councillor Blacken, and was carried. That concludes our meeting for tonight. The meeting is closed. Thank you.